that could be over a form of trauma bonding. Maybe you shared something and I thought I was the only person in the world that went through that.
Yeah.
And then when you share it, now I don't feel quite so alone.
Yes.
So now I'm like, oh, I can't let Sean go. I mean, she's just so amazing. And
She's
we've both
just
gone
like
through
me.
this experience. Why would I not want to keep somebody like her in my life, as opposed to hoping that maybe somebody else has also gone through the same experience and we're going to equally have a similar connection? You don't know.
Amen. And so going to that with those behaviors that we learn as childhood, I wanted to ask you also about this idea of trauma bonding, right? Another term that we've heard out there that is, to me, new in the Black community. I don't hear many people talking about it, but I did want to bring it up and say, is this the same or similar is of what is happening in these toxic relationships, the idea of trauma bonding? And can you explain what is trauma bonding?
For a lot of people, that term could be new. In the mental health field, it's pretty common, depending on who you work with. Now, I will clarify. Because there's levels to how a lot of therapists work, for the audience that may not know. So you have inpatient facilities, like, for example, if you have a loved one who might be a threat to themselves or a threat to somebody else, like they threaten somebody, they might do something called being Baker acted, meaning they're being committed to a facility for usually 40 to 72 hours.
Yeah.
In facilities like that, something like that, trauma bonding is quite common. The reason why is because you're being in a similar environment with a lot of people who are coming with a multitude of issues from a lot of different backgrounds.
Yes.
And you can imagine, hopefully, it's a very disorienting experience, right? Like, I'm being forced to be somewhere that I don't necessarily want to be, but it's because some stuff is going on in my mind, or maybe I'm making some decisions that are really risky. In those environments, sometimes people connect with other people through those traumatic experiences.
Exactly.
Like,
And
I tried to harm myself.
Right.
Oh, I tried to harm myself too. Well, how did you do it? Oh, I tried to do it like that too.
Exactly.
Oh, wow, we have so much in common. And sometimes that can create an unhealthy relationship. Not so much that your experience is not relevant, because we all have lived experience. Many of us have gone through trauma, particularly if you're Black.
Yes.
But if my initial encounter with you is in that lens, and the first conversations we're talking about are in that way, that is what can create an unhealthy, what we would call a trauma bond, if that makes sense.
Okay, I love it. And so I just want to, I guess, make the distinction, because you went to, bonding with someone who was, let's say, in an inpatient facility.
Sure.
And so would you also consider trauma bonding is someone bonding just over being maybe an abused child or a neglected child, abandonment issues? Do people also trauma bond over that as well?
They can. What the reason why I broke it down to you that way is because that's the most common way that we would say we see it in the mental health world. But could it happen like in a normal day-to-day life? Sure. You have people who, in their lived experience, it could be like when they're trying to court somebody, they could try to figure out and quickly determine what's the most vulnerable amount of information I can get, or sensitive information I can get from this person. And then maybe there's their lived experience. Maybe they're concocting a story to try to connect with you. Because again, we as humans, we all thrive for connection. Yes. Right? We're social beings.
Yes, for
so
sure.
we want that. So if you tell me you've gone through this experience and I'm like, oh, I went through that too, and I happen to share that with you, now we're kind of looking at each other maybe a little more hopeful, like, oh, maybe this could have a more significant relationship.
I'm ideally hopeful. I worry about people who look at you in a manipulative way, like, oh, they're broken, right? Or
could be, which that's the risky part, right?
That's
I mean, when you don't really know somebody, and I don't know how much you talk about this, but I talk about like when you're trying to get to know somebody, especially when you're talking about in the basic dating scene. And for men and women, obviously it's a little different. So I'll speak from the man's perspective. We usually initiate everything, right? So for us, we have to understand, and we have to learn through failure, of course, how to pace how much you're sharing.
Yes.
Right? Because
yes, for sure.
It is possible to overload someone. If I come off on first date and I'm telling you how awesome you are and how much I like you and I can't wait to see you again, and I'm trying to plan all these extra dates, for some women, for many women, that could be a turnoff.
Yes.
Right? They might be like, why are you trying so hard? I don't understand where all this is coming from.
What's going on?
Right.
It's
or if I ever threw out there, like, I think I love her. They're like, what? How? Like, I just met you. How could you possibly be developing these feelings? That could be over a form of trauma bonding. Maybe you shared something and I thought I was the only person in the world that went through that.
Yeah.
And then when you share it, now I don't feel quite so alone.
Yes.
So now I'm like, oh, I can't let Sean go. I mean, she's just so amazing. And we've
just like me.
Experience. Why would I not want to keep somebody like her in my life, as opposed to hoping that maybe somebody else has also gone through the same experience and we're going to equally have a similar connection?
Exactly.
You don't know.